In this video, we are going to analyze how significant, gerrymandering may have occurred in some of these states, and states where they really didn't gerrymander, maybe because of independent commission, maybe something else. But we're going to look at how significant gerrymanders were across some of these states. And we're going to use this House of Representatives map to show that. Now, obviously, we can only look at districts where they have many seats, and we'll start off with California as it has the most, and we're going to work west to east. Now, these maps weren't really drawn that much when California, had to reapportion, and it went from 4211 to 4012. So you can't really say that there's any gerrymandering done. So 2024, you have to just look at some of these districts in California and look at how close they were. Like in 2022, look at how close the 13th district was. Look at how close the 22nd district was. The 41st district was close. All these districts in parts of California wound up being close. So it's no surprise that a lot of them flip, like the 22nd. The 13th, flips. 27th flips. We see many of these other areas that voted for a Republican before now vote for a Democrat. But that's not really because of gerrymandering. It's maybe because of the coattail effect of Kamala Harris. Now, I will say that California wasn't exactly a super strong state for Harris, relatively speaking, as she won it by 20 points, which is a lot, but a lot down from the 29 that Biden won it by, the 30 that Clinton won it by, the 23 that Obama won it by, or the 24 in the election before. But you do realize that California only voted for Kerry by 10 points, so you do still realize that California is still solidly blue, and Harris's coattails may have helped in that case. Nevada, though, this feels gerrymandered. And remember, they had a trifecta before 2022. It was just that in 2022, as you could see in Nevada, the Republicans wound up flipping the governorship as Lombardo won the race. But in 2018, Democrats held that seat. And again, this is a state that Trump won in 2024. But you look at the House race, and it really does look like they gerrymandered it around the Las Vegas area. Now, to be fair, Democrats had all these seats since 2016, but you look at the redistricting and looking at it, districts like the 4th and the 3rd looked vulnerable, while the 1st was safe. So what Democrats did was that they really diluted that safe district to make these districts, a bit safer, even though now the result is you actually have 3 districts that all lean Democrat, but are all slightly competitive, though these districts mostly became more sure for Democrats in the 2024 elections. But again, this is a bad gerrymander. Nevada really should be 2-2, and instead it's 3-1 in favor of the Democrats, and it's pretty obvious that this Las Vegas area was chopped up so that Democrats could have all of these districts. Oregon. Now here's the thing. Oregon actually gained a seat, and before it was 4-1. But geographically it makes sense since all the Republicans concentrate in eastern Oregon and they're more spread out, in the western parts of Oregon. Still a bit gerrymandered, but not really. There's a reason as to why, even when Republicans had their landslides in the 2010s, why they still couldn't break through Oregon. And then it actually comes 4-2. Like, this looks like a pretty fair map, if you say so myself. It's not really Democrats' fault that Republicans couldn't hold on to the 5th district in 2024. I mean, this map, it does give Republicans an opportunity to go 4-2, as we saw in 2022. Republicans just have to not be stupid and lose that race. And we even saw districts like the 6th be in play for Republicans in 2022, as the Democrats won it by 2.4. Now, obviously, these districts all shored up for the Democrats in 2024, but it's not really the redistricting's fault. These maps look relatively fair. It's just that, it's a bit gerrymandered, but when looking at like a presidential race out of Oregon as an example, and you look at like how much Republicans are concentrated in the eastern parts of Oregon. It's like it's I get that there's some Republicans in Southwest Oregon, but like this whole area of Oregon is strongly Democratic, and it sort of makes sense as to why Oregon's districts look this way. I mean, could this be a bit gerrymandered? I think that the fourth could be a bit gerrymandered. Um, you know, putting it like that, but it's not that egregious. And again, Washington, it's 8-2, and before the races, it was 7-3. But it wasn't really a gerrymander. This was a district where you had a Republican who voted to impeach Trump, got primaried, but then lost their seat to a Democrat in the 3rd district by 0.8%. Trump carried this district in Washington. I mean, sure, could it be a bit gerrymandered? Like, yes. But, you look at state of Washington and you realize, like, in the 3rd district, like, Trump still carried that district. But when the Republicans are stupid in 2022, and this is why the red wave didn't happen, it was for reasons like this. Like, sure, these maps are probably a bit gerrymandered around the Seattle area, but that's going to happen. That's going to happen. These maps don't look too gerrymandered. Now, Montana gets interesting because in 2022, now Republicans are the trifecta in Montana, obviously, but in 2022, the 1st district actually comes close. Democrats almost have a chance here. And even though it's shored up for Republicans in 2024, as the margin of victory went from 3.2 points to 7.7, this district could be in play for Democrats in the event of a strong wave election in their favor. Now, Colorado, if Democrats are trying to gerrymander Colorado, they did a really bad job. It almost looks like a bit of a Republican gerrymander. So, obviously, Democrats have the 4-3 edge in Colorado after 2020, but that's pretty reasonable when you look at the presidential election in Colorado in 2020 and realize that Biden won the state by 13.5 points. In 2024, we see Harris win the state by 11%. Colorado is really a state that has just taken one of the biggest shifts towards the Republicans, towards the Democrats over the past decade. Like, there's not too many other states that have had this big of a shift towards Democrats since 2012, a Republican favorable election. It's really only Utah, Kansas, Georgia that are like on this kind of a level. Compared from 2008, and it's very rare to see states, have any swing towards Democrats, let alone this much of a swing, and yet Colorado did. Looking at 2004, Colorado is really up there with Utah and Maryland as some of the biggest shifts towards the Democratic Party that we've seen. And, the fact that Republicans have a split delegation in Colorado is incredible. Granted, the 8th district was super competitive, and it was competitive in 2022 as well. The 3rd district was close, but that's because Bobo was an idiot, so he moved to this district so that he would keep a seat. Now the 3rd district is a bit more solid for Republicans, but again, 5% is easily surmountable. This really could be 6-2 Democrats, but that wouldn't really make it a gerrymander, because right now, again, it's 4-4. What was gerrymandered was New Mexico. Basically, in 2016, you had this 2-1 split in New Mexico's House seats. You had that split. 2018, a wave election, and Democrats actually managed to flip the 2nd district. But in 2020, Republicans flip it right back. Then they gerrymander the Albuquerque area to instead make it split amongst all 3 districts to flip the 2nd district back. This is a gerrymander. Because Albuquerque is now being split up to make this area go back to the Democratic column. And in 2024, we see the solidification extend even more. Texas is a weird gerrymander. Basically, there were a ton of competitive races in Texas in 2020. So even though the 23-13 split remained pretty constant, It was just that a lot of these races for Republicans were really competitive. Like the 23rd district was competitive really both times, um, and all that stuff. What Republicans did was that they pretty much made it so there's only one district in Texas that Republicans have that's even slightly competitive, the 15th. Democrats didn't really lose any seats. Republicans only gained two. But it's going to be almost impossible for Democrats to make gains in Texas under these maps. Nebraska is just. I'm not even going to touch on Nebraska or really Maine because they don't have a lot of districts and it gets so confusing with the presidential election system as to what's happening. Now, Oklahoma, you could say, is gerrymandered. Republicans gerrymandered. And they probably did because, look, in 2018, Democrats flipped the fifth, but they lose it in 2020, but it's still close. Then Republicans make it so that Oklahoma City's Democratic leaning areas are now split up so that now all these districts are solid for the Republican Party. And we see this trend remain in Oklahoma. That was probably a gerrymander. They probably wanted to make sure that Democrats didn't get a seat. And we actually saw the same thing in Utah, too. 2018, we see the 4th district narrowly vote for a Democrat as they flip the seat. 2020, Republicans get it back, but it's close. It's 1% in the 4th district of Utah. So in 2022, Salt Lake City is now divided so that, so that now Republicans have safe seats in all 4 seats in Utah. Now, Arkansas, same thing around Little Rock. Again, you have this giant gerrymander that you could see because before that, the 2nd district was slightly competitive. But again, the gerrymandering done in Arkansas was really exposed a while ago when they completely just chopped off this Democratic leaning area of southern Arkansas. So the real gerrymandering was probably done in 2010, considering that, Republicans used to not even have the edge in Arkansas seats. It used to be pretty solid. Now, part of this is because of the changing demographics of the state, on this level, but still, it's unacceptable. Missouri is probably gerrymandered a bit, but it's tough to really tell what's going on and how much of a gerrymander it is. Iowa is gerrymandered as well. They pretty much split the Democratic leaning areas so Republicans had all 4 seats because in 2018, Democrats actually had 3 seats in Iowa. And even the 4th district, that's usually reliably Republican, was close. King won by 3 points. Now, Democrats then Republicans in 2020 get 2 seats back. But again, the 2nd is very close. And they still have the 3rd. So they gerrymandered it a little bit. So the 3rd now tilts towards Republicans. And to make these districts more safe for Republicans. Now, this district was actually very close in 2024, and this district was too. Nunn and Miller Meeks really have a strong chance of losing re-election, especially if they side with the Trump agenda. But we saw the solidification of Iowa's 2nd district, even though the maps didn't really change that much. We certainly saw shifts in the state's voting demographics. Now, a gerrymander in Louisiana was actually struck down. Initially, it was 5-1 in this really bad racial gerrymander that occurred in the state. As much as you had that. And you look at 2024, and they're actually forced to incorporate 2 minority-majority districts, not just 1. So now we see Louisiana is not gerrymandered. Same thing in Alabama. They were forced to add another district here, another majority-minority district here, to really end the gerrymandering that, Alabama Republicans were able to do. Georgia's a bit of a gerrymander. They basically split up 2 of these Democratic districts and merged them into 1 that are competitive. And they also made it so that basically there's no chance that Georgia Democrats could ever gain any of these seats. Still always be stuck at 9-5, basically, is what they did. Florida was severely gerrymandered. I get that the state's demographics rapidly shifted, but like you had this area, the 5th district, that was just completely chopped up amongst these Republican districts in 2022. We saw they basically turned 2 Democratic districts in Tampa into 1 because of this. And they chopped away at a lot of Democratic leaning districts in, Central Florida and Southern Florida. They really gerrymandered this map. They gained, Democrats lost 3, Republicans gained 4 on this gerrymander. This is a state where Democrats had almost half the seats in 2018. Just like what happened to Florida, but again, an egregious gerrymander is what happened to Florida. South Carolina, you also saw a strong gerrymander. Basically, in 2018, again, Democrats get the 1st district, but Republicans get it back in 2020, but it's close. Then they basically make it where you have this one really Democratic district and everything else is safe for the Republicans. Look, the 1st district is now not even continuous anymore across Charleston. It's actually unacceptable what happened here. Tennessee, again, you notice that how Republican it is around Nashville? That used to be a Democratic-leaning district, not anymore as Republicans chopped it up. But of course, Democrats are also very capable of gerrymandering. Notice how in 2018 and 2020 it's 13-5 in Illinois, and then they chop up this entire corridor to make it a Democratic leaning district, which basically juts out in a very weird direction, and it pretty much makes this district almost non-continuous. You also have this really awkward gerrymander, to cut down on Republican seats to make this awkward district. So that's also like really awkward and really stupid. Obviously, the Chicago districts make sense where they're all safely Democrat, but they basically made 2 Democratic districts, in areas that may not have really supported that, and then the election becomes even weirder when you look at this kind of a map. Kentucky might be gerrymandered, but it's also so strongly red that it's tough to really tell what's going on with Kentucky. Now in Ohio, Republicans tried to gerrymander, but they couldn't get support to their side, so they wound up losing seats. But again, lots of them were close. North Carolina was awkward because Republicans had an 8-5 majority. Then it was split 7-7 after a court-order redistricting in 2022. Yet in 2024, it's down to 10-4 now because then that case was struck down, and so North Carolina Republicans were able to redistrict. The Supreme Court flipped towards the Republican side, and they ruled that partisan gerrymandering is not judiciable. And worse, these seats are all solid Republican, really. And they made the 1st competitive. Maryland is gerrymandered for Democrats too. You look at Maryland and how they redrew the maps, and it was always really going to be 7-1, but they just made this number one. They made this more competitive, and again they still wouldn't. This map still strongly favors Democrats. It'll still be 7-1 when probably shouldn't be. But at least the 6th is somewhat competitive now in Maryland. New York is awkward because look, it was 19-8, and then Democrats tried to gerrymander the map, but it was struck down, and we actually saw a 15-11 map. We saw all these districts vote for Republicans. Well, that was no more. This district in upstate got gerrymandered into a Democratic district, but 19-7 isn't unreasonable for New York either. New Hampshire's weird because the Republicans are trying to gerrymander the state, like make it 1-1. Don't make it like the same, 2-2, where Republicans have a very low chance of flipping either of these seats. And that's it for gerrymandering.